From across time and space and throughout the multiverse, listen as multiple generations of geeks come together to discuss the iconic characters, events, and franchises that make up the very fabric of pop culture as we know it. Let Your Geek Side Show presents Then and Now. Hey guys, this is Kitty.
And this is Emily.
And we are coming to you from the Sideshow Studios in Southern California. Whosoever listens to this podcast, if they be worthy, shall learn the storied history of Marvel's very own god of thunder, Thor. From mythology to monthly comics, the veritable Viking Avenger has had a storied saga of monsters, mortals, and gods. It takes a special type of person to wield the mystical mallet Mjolnir, but as seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the hammer is not what makes someone a hero. What does it mean to truly be worthy? Let's find out. Here comes the lightning and thunder. This is Marvel's Thor, Then and Now. All right. Thank you very much for joining me this week, Emily.
Thanks for having me, Kitty.
I'm very excited. This is a topic that I've wanted to use as a then and now for a very long time, but it took a special moment, and I needed someone else who could dialogue about Thor with me.
Yes.
And I think this was a really good time to do it because this week is when Jason Aaron's massive 7-year saga of Thor in the comics has just ended with King Thor number 4. That's it. He's done 7 consecutive years of writing Mighty Thor, God of Thunder, Unworthy, Thors plural, all the different Thors for 7 straight years. And it's I was afraid we were going to get to the end of the comic and not really know where Thor is going next, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe has given us a clear pathway forward because in 2 short years, we've got Thor Love and Thunder coming up.
So excited to a degree at which I can't even articulate.
It's one of those things where it's like they've dropped the trailers for Black Widow and I'm like, yeah, that's nice. I'm excited.
But let's talk about Thor.
Get me to the Thor.
Put her to the side. Let's get down to who we really want.
Yes. And I think that makes Thor the first of the Marvel Cinematic characters to have 4 films to themselves, or to 4 of their own self-titled films, because Captain America had 3 of them.
That's true. Oh man, I never even thought about that.
There's technically 4 Avengers films, but
that's like a group thing.
Yeah,
that's like a group project. Who really gets the credit there?
Yeah. What's up, Thor? So that's pretty exciting, and I think that's a big deal. And the best part of that is Love and Thunder is going to be taking a lot of cues from the Thor series that is just wrapping up, the Jason Aaron stuff.
Exactly. And so now we really get to kind of see where Thor is going to go, because, I mean, originally we had a lot more of a cinematic Thor, and then in the most recent ones, it almost seemed going the way of Guardians of the Galaxy and being a lot more of a comedy almost.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny when people actually started to call it as Guardians of the Galaxy when they saw his interactions with the Guardians in Infinity War. And then Marvel actually did publish for a brief time a comic called As Guardians of the Galaxy. Thor himself was not involved, but the team did include a number of Thor mythos notables. There was Angela, his sister, in the comics, who Spawn fans might recognize from Spawn before she made the jump to Marvel. The son of Eric Masterson, I think his name is Kevin Masterson, who was a Thor, but then became Thunderstrike, was also on the team. And then Thor Frog, who
needs no introduction.
Thor
Frog.
Except for when we have to clarify, there are 2 Thor frogs, technically. There's the Thor who was turned into a frog, and then there was a man who was turned into a frog who became a Thor.
There we go.
So there we go. Well, and I think that's one of the fun parts is when we get to this point where obviously, like, you and I both know, Jane Foster Thor was a pretty big mover and shaker. Oh yeah, she's both of our girls here. But it wasn't unprecedented that there's been numerous Thors over the years.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely nothing new. But the fact that we're now getting into other Thors for the first time in the MCU, it's going to be something different. I mean, Cap picked up the hammer.
And that was a pretty big deal, even though he has done it in the comics. So, I mean, some people were expecting and hoping for that. But the gasps of joy in the theater when that occurred in Endgame was pretty, I mean, for lack of a better word, electric. The audience energy was so big.
I cried. I straight up cried. No joke. Just tears.
And I think it's really cool because while we did in Age of Ultron, we got some like teases that everyone wanted to kind of play, like who could pick up the hammer.
But it was a joke at that point.
Yeah. They kept it special. They did.
It was a glorious moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice also tie now that we can segue into seeing how someone like Jane Foster in the Marvel Cinematic Universe first of all, gets her hands on a hammer, and second of all, becomes a Thor.
Precisely. And there's a whole slew of people out there who have never picked up any of the comic books and just realized, oh my gosh, somebody else can, wield the hammer. This really segues into, the general public's understanding of how Thor, quote unquote, works.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, where Marvel's developing their animated What If series, one of my first introductions, like I came into the Marvel comics and cinematic universe, I saw the first Iron Man, but I didn't watch any of the films in between that and the Avengers, because there was a 2-year gap between Iron Man's 1 and 2, and by that time I didn't realize this was like a full project.
Yeah.
But Avengers 2012 was right about when God of Thunder was coming out for the first time for Jason Aaron's book. But I started reading the back materials of, I wanted the what ifs from the comics. And there's a lot of what ifs for who held the hammer of Thor. They've done Storm. They've done Rogue. They did Jane Foster. They did Loki, which is possibly my favorite, because he finds the hammer. He goes, this looks important. He finds the walking stick, because originally Mjolnir did have the like switches between a walking stick and a hammer thing. He finds it. He goes, this looks important. He chucks it in the forest where, and then the rest of the events of the original Journey into Mystery play out, where Donald Blake, he falls into the cave and he has no way to get himself back out because Loki's already chucked the hammer elsewhere. So
Super helpful.
Donald Blake, I think he dies, and then Odin shows up and was like, yeah, Loki, you really kind of screwed it on that one. Like, I needed my son to be worthy again. And that one's just so funny because it's so dumb.
Just ruined that campaign.
But it wasn't unprecedented. But until Jane Foster picked up the hammer in, the series first started in 2014, but I don't think they revealed it until either the end of 14 or the beginning of 15. I know, it seems she had a solid several years, which is a lot longer than characters that were also her contemporaries, like the Superior Iron Man and Captain America Falcon had at the time. But until Jane Foster did that, none of those like what if stories were canonical. No woman had the hammer actually until that point. But we'd had famously we've had the Frog, and we've had my boy Beta Ray Bill, who is a horse-faced alien, for lack of a better term. He's a Corbinite. And then we've had plenty of dudes. We had Eric Masterson, who was an architect, I believe. We had Roger Norville, who was part of a film crew. Awesome Android, whose head is a rock. And Superman and Wonder Woman, actually. Did you know that?
Okay, I need an explanation of this right now.
There was a Justice League versus the Avengers comic, and there's a very famous image of Superman holding the hammer. And it's actually really funny. Marvel just recently did a book called Thor the Worthy, and it was a couple of small stories about Beta Ray Bill, Jane Foster, and Thor Odinson as kind of like a collection of here's a bunch of different Thors. But there's one panel in which they kind of pay tribute to everyone who's held, or
Thors
not everyone,
of years
but
past.
Thors of years past. And in shadow, you see Superman with his little kiss curl, and then you see the lasso of truth and someone holding the hammer right next to it. And I was like, wow, I can't believe they actually snuck that into a Marvel book.
I mean, if anybody's going to be worthy, it's going to be those two.
Seriously. And when people do their Marvel versus DC matchups, you obviously get the billionaires Iron Man versus Batman, and you get Cap versus Superman, the all-American boy. But a lot of people pair Thor with Wonder Woman because they're both
see it, man.
gods and they fight for humanity.
Got that otherworldly thing going on for them.
Yeah. Now I want to take it back. So I'm familiar enough with Thor's origins of like when they wanted to actually create him as a character. But I didn't know this tidbit. Thor was specifically created to oppose the Hulk because Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had just introduced the Hulk, who was the strongest man on Earth. And I love that classic kind of gray Hulk deal. There was a lot going on with him, but they wanted someone who could oppose him. And Stan thought to himself, well, who's going to be stronger than the strongest man on Earth? It has to be...
Got to look elsewhere than Earth.
Yeah, you got to look elsewhere than Earth, and it should be a god, not just a man. And so then in comes Thor, which I think that was very interesting because you do see the Thor and the Hulk, especially a lot in the movies, butting heads constantly.
It's a constant rivalry between the two. I mean, no matter what movie you look at, if the two are in a film together, it's going to be some kind of butting heads, showing of strength. it's constant because they're the only ones who can really compare to each other.
Yeah, which made a very interesting and almost natural choice for them to combine Ragnarok with the kind of Planet Hulk storyline that they did and get what Taika Waititi put on whatever the hell it was that he put on screens.
That was a beautiful, weird form of a buddy cop movie that I did not know I needed in my life. But the combination of them is just it's ripe for comedy, and I was shocked and amazed at what I got out of that movie. I loved it.
Yeah, for me, Ragnarok, I really liked. For me, like the first 20 and the last 20 minutes, I think where it's the he's got the hammer, he thinks he's so cool, he shows up in Asgard, and then the whole deal with his father, and that just, but the like, are you the god of hammers when it comes around full circle to that at the end, and you get this really cool, like, he is more than the hammer. I wish they hadn't gone immediately then in Infinity War going, well, he doesn't have a hammer, so we should quickly make him something else to hold on to.
I know, right?
But I think it was interesting.
Let him struggle a little bit.
The way that they carried that, because there was a lot of and actually the line, "Are you the god of hammers?" Is from the Jason Aaron stuff, because he's fighting the God Butcher, who's like, no god is worthy. They all betray their people. They think they're better than the people who pray to them. And then Thor's like, I'll show you. I'm not the god of hammers. I'm the god of thunder and lightning. So I think that's a really cool thing that they've been able to carry through the films.
Oh, yeah. And especially anytime that they can draw back into the origins of these characters, where they come from, how they were made, and bring them to the films. It's always such a pleasure to see, because we have a whole generation of people who never read the comic books. So every little tidbit we get is such a win for people who have read the comic books, to bring them into what we have seen.
Yeah. I remember after the announcement of Love and Thunder at this last Comic-Con, after I spent like a solid hour just sobbing.
So many tears.
Like a week or two later, Natalie Portman posted an Instagram story, which actually I'm really excited. She's got more of a social media presence now. I know for a while she was out of there, but that just makes me hopeful for the future of seeing Love and Thunder behind the scenes content. But she posted a picture of herself with all the volumes of the Jason Aaron book, and that just
makes
got
us
me
a happy soul.
Just got me so excited. Because I think one of the things that that series did brilliantly so the Thor movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was 2011, and around that time they did a couple of relaunches. They actually did one of my favorite underappreciated Thor books, which was Chris Samnee and Roger Landridge's Thor the Mighty Avenger, and that was like the really cutesy, kind of alternate, not continuity Thor story where Jane works at a museum and Thor's hammer has somehow ended up as a relic in the museum and he needs to get it back. Like that book was so delightful and showcased the lighthearted side of Thor, but unfortunately it's not considered canon. But for a while they'd really gotten away from, like, Thor is a myth character, obviously. And Walt Simonson's run was one of the first ones that really started digging in deeper to that mythology, and then Straczynski built off of that, and so did Matt Fraction. But for a long time, when they kind of did away with the Donald Blake identity, you just had Thor constantly in your face, big warrior guy, which he's great, but we lacked the
human side.
The human side, which is what we got in the very beginning when we had Dr. Donald Blake, who was an injured man who worked to save lives alongside his nurse, and the balance of the identities was really cool. So then when we get back to Jane Foster, and I loved that debut series where it was a mystery, but once the training wheels were off and they're like, okay, you all know it's Jane Foster, even though I knew from the start. Yeah. In my heart.
It was there.
Once you got back to that balance of we have a woman who's hiding her identity for the safety of her friends and others, but she's also infirmed. She's sick with cancer, and she's making the trade that when she becomes Thor, it nullifies her chemo treatments. It acts as if
it's a self-sacrifice that we want to say that we see a lot in comic books, but not really. I mean, they'll run into battle for, to save the world and whatnot, but to really truly give of themselves, to make that conscious choice, it's not some big huge action. She's basically taking her own life in order to be able to be Thor and be there for them.
Yeah, and that was a fascinating and really nice way to bring some stakes back into the some personal stakes back into the Thor universe.
Some drama.
Because we've had a lot of interesting ways the hammer has been passed. In a lot of the alternate universe stories, Rogue could take it because she absorbed Thor's worthiness when she touched him, which was weird. Storm was given a fake hammer by Loki, so it wasn't even a real version of Mjolnir. It was like a trick hammer.
Yeah.
And who else am I forgetting? And in the normal continuity, Eric Masterson was his soul was combined with the real Thor, so he could use that. And then Roger Norville was given a hammer because Odin was basically trying to make another Thor so that the real Thor didn't have to die in Ragnarok. And then Beta Ray Bill picks up the hammer and Odin's like, hey, my son kind of needs that back, but we'll make you another hammer. So there's a lot of really weird ways the hammers trade off.
And honestly, if you really think about that, going through every single incident that you've talked about, maybe one or two of them have been you are truly worthy on your own, and that is why you can pick up the hammer.
Yeah.
I find interesting.
There's even a couple of more recent ones. There was, I think in 2013, Natasha Romanoff in an alternate universe Age of Ultron was worthy, but that she only became worthy after everyone else died, and she was the last one left and was like, I guess I gotta...
You're worthy by default.
Yeah, and same thing happened with Danielle Cage, Jessica Jones's daughter, in a Dead Man Logan series where Wolverine is really... just geriatric Wolverine, but she's grown up in the way. So it's the qualifications for worthiness have been mixed and many. But Jane Foster, I think, apart from Beta Ray Bill, I think she was the first real one that was this. She's a real one.
Your soul is so good enough, that you get the hammer for no other reason than you are good and worthy.
Well, and not only that, her worthiness leveled up Mjolnir itself and gave it powers that no one had seen. She could redirect it in mid-flight, and it could boomerang around people. And
lovely.
I'm a sucker for the fact that Mjolnir could actually form a physical image of Jane to trick some SHIELD agents who had caught onto her. And then of course the hammer replies with the caveat, I can only do that once every couple hundred years, so don't expect that anytime soon again in the comics. But it was a real nice return to the origin of Thor. And I know at first, as any new change in a comic book, it was unpopular with a lot of people. A lot of vocal fans who took to the internet, didn't read the story, but the people who read the book loved it, and the staying power of the character, the fact that she's had statues and figures, my favorite was she's had a Party City costume, like a crappy Jane Foster Party City costume.
Why don't you own this?
I don't know.
Please tell me.
But it just brought me so much joy. But in that time, on the flip side, if people didn't give the Jane Foster stuff a chance, they also didn't give a chance to the really cool Thor Odinson subplot that was going on.
Exactly. There's so much going on there.
Yeah, both through God of Thunder and then in the background of Mighty. And then he had his own series, Unworthy Thor, which I think if you're going to give a character this mystical mallet that has a condition on it, it's no fun if the character every day is yep, this is mine guaranteed. I don't have to do anything about it. I can be brash. I can be bold because clearly what I'm doing is working for me.
Well, and the great thing about this Unworthy Thor is you really get to see how privileged Thor was because of his hammer. It's this underside, this gritty, what do I do without my powers? What am I? It's the kind of like the Iron Man quote, what are you without the suit?
Yeah.
You know?
If you're nothing without the suit, you don't deserve the suit.
Precisely.
And it always brings me back. The first Thor movie is one of my top 3 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. It's so Shakespearean in its drama. Thanks, Kenny B. But I just love Anthony Hopkins yelling. I forget what Thor says, but he's just you're an old man and a fool. And it's you are a vain, greedy, cruel little boy. And I love that, because he does, get a slice of humble pie.
Oh, yeah. He needs to be put in his place. And unfortunately, that happens a lot with Thor, which is kind of what I really love about Jane Foster, is that she doesn't seem to take being Thor for granted. And she doesn't seem to swing it around quite as much, which is nice to see. You know, she's not like, let me just go and be the superhero everybody wants me to be. She knows what she's supposed to be doing, and she's going out and doing it and really not taking it any further. She's using it for what it's been given for.
Yeah. And I really liked also seeing her up against all the people who then believed in, like, I like the reflection of the outer world in the narrative, how many people were like, you don't deserve to take this. You are usurping Thor's power. We had Kolborsen, who was Odin's brother, the god of fear. We had Odin being real trashy about it. Even like Sif was like, I don't trust this new female Thor. Like, I don't like it. And so it was interesting to see what it took for Jane, a mortal, to earn the trust of gods and kind of gently show them how it's done.
And what was beautiful was how that compared to her real life perception. I mean, honestly, you have the character in the story going through exactly what she is going through outside of the story. It is getting the community to go, okay, yes, this is Thor. You know, they so many naysayers, so many people who were like, oh, no, don't touch my Thor. But she really proved herself within the comics, within, you know, the actions that she took and the beauty behind that comic book. Oh my gosh, that is...
Shout out to Russell Dodderman and Matt Wilson on the coloring.
Beyond gorgeous.
Oh my
Most
goodness.
beautiful comic book I've ever seen, hands down.
Well, and then for Jason Aaron, I mean, it's interesting because he was writing previously. He did Ghost Rider and he did Wolverine. So he does the gruff, rough and tumble guys. I mean, he's the writer behind Southern Bastards, that's the Southern Fried Football Murder comic, which I actually am surprised that I love as much as I do. But it, to my knowledge, no writer has had a consecutive run as long as Jason Aaron, apart from, I think, Tom DeFalco in the 80s. But even Simonson, who his run is legendary for about the 30 issues that he was writing and doing the artwork. But that was 30 issues. That wasn't 7 years of books. I mean, Jane Foster's series alone went about 35 issues. God of Thunder was 25 issues. You've got the 4-issue Thor's Mini in Secret Wars. You've got the 5-issue Unworthy. You've got Thor with Mike Del Mundo. And then you've got, am I missing anything? And then you've got the War of the Realms. Jason Aaron got an entire event that had been building, like, they did an entire Marvel crossover event that was 7 years in the making.
Yeah.
And I ended up reading every tie-in to that event. And it was just...
Of course you did.
That was the best because it was like Dungeons and Dragons exploded on New York. Like, that's what the event was. And it was so much fun. But it was a really solid and satisfying delivery for a payoff for a lot of themes that he'd been building up, like watching Malekith get torn apart by his own dogs. At the climax of War of the Realms was really satisfying because of how much smug evilness he'd been dispensing all throughout both God of Thunder and the Jane Foster series. And so that brings me then to the last 4 issues of Jason Aaron's run, King Thor. And we do see a lot in God of Thunder jumping between he does a really cool thing of playing with time. Like Jane Foster, her timeline was pretty solid because
pretty straightforward.
We had the balance between like mortal Jane and goddess Jane. But Thor: God of Thunder did a really cool thing with, like, he's not primitive Thor. I keep wanting to call him primitive Thor, but like the youngest version of Thor who carries an axe. He hasn't even like dreamt of being. I mean, he dreams of being worthy of the hammer, but he hasn't even like attempted to pick it up, or he hasn't.
Baby Thor.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then you've got contemporary Thor, and then you've got old King Thor, who has lost an eye, lost an arm. He's been through so much. And so the King Thor book now, very end of the universe, he's built up new worlds, and one of his greatest foes comes back to fight him at the very end of the universe and say, again, ultimately, gods aren't worth anything. What they create just ends in destruction. And so it's a fascinating thing and a really not bittersweet, because I'm sure it's like
it's a great way to close it.
Yeah,
really. It's full circle at that point.
Yeah,
I mean, just kind of the way that Thor has always been, having him be this statuesque kind of older version of Thor that we really don't think a whole lot of, seeing him in the other books and whatnot. We think of, like with the movie, he's this young guy who's very, full of himself. Mm-hmm. So having this more humbled version is really bringing it back to the beginning.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to see how he becomes more like his father, where as a younger Thor, the father looks like the villain, but like And yeah, Odin's not the greatest guy, I will say.
Not perfect.
But like it's really cool to see the older Thor is a combination of what he's learned from all the other Thors, all his mother, his father. It's a really, really cool thing. It's also fascinating that Marvel would let a writer do that. And like, I hope it doesn't get retconned at any point, because it is a really
that
cool
would be so sad.
bookend. But then the next writer, who Nick Klein is the artist, and Donny Cates, who is currently on Venom, his Guardians of the Galaxy book just ended. He's doing a lot of really cool stuff and is one of Jason Aaron's biggest fans, after me, of course. No disrespect, Donny. Donny's taking on Thor next, but he's taking on a Thor that has now just become the All-Father, because that's what happens at the end of War of the Realms. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting to see how he's going to both deviate from the path that Jason Aaron has set for him, because there's always time to wind it back when 10 years down the line the next writer goes and takes it on, or whatever. But also to see how he's going to follow in those steps to get Thor to the guy he is supposed to be by the end of Jason Aaron's story.
It's going to be really, really interesting, especially when you're going over to an entirely new viewpoint, and switching writers is always kind of like, it's like moving houses. You're like, I don't know what to expect. It's a nervous feeling, but exciting.
And then it's like, are you going to follow the next writer just because it's like, do you follow the writer or do you follow the character? Like,
exactly.
Admittedly, there's very few, but there are some Thor runs that I'm like, this just doesn't do it for me the same way that Jason Aaron's does, or Straczynski's, or the Roger Landridge one is really like it. That one's like an all ages, like very lighthearted Thor.
Yes, happy Thor.
But again, that one has its own strengths in, and though it is so vastly different from the other ones, it's still a Thor story, because I think at the core of it is about that, like he does need that fall. He does need that coming back to so. Yeah, so it baffled me for the people who were like, "Oh, well, you can't have Thor without his hammer." I'm like, but
but you can.
That was what brought us Thor comics in the first place.
Yeah, you need a base to start with. Everybody thinks it's the hammer. It is not. It is the character behind it. Thor as a character, it's a garnish that you build everything else upon, but you need somebody to start with.
Yeah, and it's the hammer says, "Whosoever holds this hammer." If actually, there's been a he, she, and a they. They very inclusive hammers. But if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. Mm-hmm. Now, oftentimes the power may or may not come with the name Thor, as we see with Eric Masterson and Roger Norville and Jane Foster. Mm-hmm. And people were kind of incensed about that's his name, but it's also like Thor Odinson is not guaranteed the power of Thor, because Thor, as opposed to Thor Odinson, is the mythical kind of quality. To it, and I mean, they do really interesting things where it's like, you're like, yes, they are, all these characters are from the Norse myths, but they're also the Marvel versions of it, so it's not straight up. So there's room to play in that
creative license there.
I actually learned, fun fact, just interjecting this here, Jack Kirby technically drew a Thor for DC Comics before Marvel had theirs.
Yes.
He did a Thor at DC in the 50s for like one of their book, all the books that are like Tales of the Weird and Unexplained, or like
those good old ones.
I mean, hell, we had Journey into Mystery. That was like the titles
super vague.
The titles that mean like nothing. So yeah, technically Jack Kirby did a Thor for DC before Marvel had their Thor, but Marvel went and ran with it. Marvel trademarked the Mighty Thor at some point, which was good on them.
Yes, very smart.
But yeah, so this is all stuff that's like, I wish. I mean, I'm so stoked that Thor's getting 4 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're getting 2 Thors in one movie.
That's
because
true.
We're gonna have Jane and we're gonna have Chris Hemsworth, Thor Odinson.
Well, and so now that I'm thinking about it, where was the last time we saw the hammer at the end of Endgame?
Cap was taking it back to the original 2014.
Okay, so now...
Dark World was 2013.
Now,
anyways,
in my head, I'm thinking, how are we going to get that hammer back for Jane?
Yeah.
That's going to be the true mystery of where does this come from?
I know. Well, and it's interesting because they did leave it pretty open with... I mean, I guess they were still dating in Age of Ultron with the one throwaway line where it's like Jane is better. But we haven't seen Jane since Dark World, especially since Ragnarok went off Earth.
Well, and it sounds like she had super dumped him by the time, like not just like a soft up. That was, he was not a happy boy.
I kind of want that to play into, because it was a Taika
so
move.
bad.
I want that to play into like the while she's been being Thor, maybe she's sick. I don't know if they're going to pursue that storyline in the movies.
That's true. That could be a large part of it because we don't know what that argument was.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fun potential, and it's fun that they've got Valkyrie. I hope they bring Lady Sif back. I hope Beta Ray Bill gets a shot, because Beta Ray Bill was an Easter egg in Ragnarok, but he was not featured properly. But if they bring in Beta Ray Bill, what are they going to do about his hammer, which is called Stormbreaker, which they gave to Thor?
Oh, no.
Yeah, check this, guys. They gave Thor the axe called Stormbreaker, which is technically the name of Beta Ray Bill's golden hammer. And Thor does have an axe called Jarnbjorn, which means Iron Bear, which is pretty cool. But now they can't use any of those things. I'm sure they'll figure it out.
I know what they're going to do. In my head, they're going to take the name of the axe. They're going to give it to the gold hammer.
Oh, God.
I'm going to put money on that. They're just going to switch things around. It'll be great.
And I hope that Taika has gotten, because two characters, one character, one of them died.
Spoiler alert.
Featured a lot in Jason Aaron's run. Were Thor's goats, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder.
I just love goats in general, so I'll be excited with any goat featuring.
Thor's got some massive goats that pull him on a chariot, and I think that is just weird enough for Taika to throw into his film. But regardless of what happens, it's going to be really cool. It'll be really fun to see how they continue that conversation of both from Ragnarok of the, like, you're more than the hammer, but also in Endgame where it was like, but you can still be worthy. Even if the hammer is what signifies that to you, then you can go for that. But
you can be worthy without the hammer.
Yeah, you can be worthy without the hammer. Yeah, because after Thor then gave it back up or gave it to Cap, he knew in his heart he's still worthy, but he doesn't need the hammer. Someone else needs it.
I don't need it right now. You can hold on to that for me.
Yeah, I love that meme. I'm not going to quote it because I don't remember it, and it's also got some swears in it, but where they like photoshopped acrylic nails on Chris Hemsworth and Evans, and it was like, girl, remember when I picked up that hammer? And it was like, yeah, I was screaming, that's my bestie. Anyway, sorry, that made no sense. There's a very funny meme.
Oh, no, I have not seen that meme, and I still understand exactly what it's for.
I will forward it to you. But yeah, yes. Like, because ultimately also, I think that Thor Thor Odinson, which I'm just so excited we're going to get to spend a little more time with him in the cinematic universe. He's not the type of person who would ever begrudge another person for being worthy. And being able to share the burden that he feels when he picks up the hammer, but also him knowing that he's not the singular person who like has to keep it all together. There are people who can help. There are other people who are worthy. So it's
not all on him.
Another humbling factor. I mean, Jane Foster almost died for him in the first movie. She threw, like, and with the destroyer armor and stuff. Like, so there's people who love him, who support him. And he needs it's both a slice of humble pie, but also the reassurance that like he doesn't have to have the expectations of everyone.
Yeah, you don't have to be Thor all the time. Somebody else can take it over, and you can go be Spaceman with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, you can go be an Asgardian of the Galaxy.
Yes,
and I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. The richness that we've gotten, especially after the explosion of the cinematic universe, and then Marvel taking the chance on Jane Foster, is that no one's guaranteed to be worthy, but anyone in any set of circumstances, whether you're a frog or you're an alien who's pure of heart, or whether you're a man who's caught up in a weird accident and your soul is bonded to Thor, or you're
Loki.
Yeah, or Loki who just throw it in the trash. Everyone has the chance to be worthy, and that's different things for different people as well.
Exactly. It's not going to be the same for everybody.
There's no cookie cutter version of worthiness. And so I think that's the most exciting and hopeful message. And something that we'll get to see in Love and Thunder in 2 years.
Such a long wait.
I know. I feel like Thor holding out his hand for the hammer.
It's like, it's coming.
It's coming eventually.
It'll be here.
It'll be really good when it gets here, but it's not here
eventually.
Yet. But until then, we should all keep trying to be worthy of the power of Thor, because I think in this day and age, that is the best that we can do.
We can all try and be a little more worthy every day.
No matter who you are, a god or a mortal, a frog or an alien, we all have worthiness within us. As seen throughout Thor's time in comics, worthiness is a process, an ongoing ideal that we must strive for. While we may not all be trying to avert Ragnarok or defeat invading frost giants, we can certainly learn something about ourselves from each Thor's heroic journey. Verily, beyond Thor Odinson's physical strength and warrior madness, it is the strength of his heart and desire to protect others that makes him a true god. His love for his friends, both Asgardian and mortal, fuels his fight to stay worthy of his own thunderous power each and every day. Thank you for joining us. This has been Marvel's Thor, Then and Now. Do you enjoy listening to Then and Now? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help keep us going. Please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcasts@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Plus, tune in for our full network of pop culture podcasts. See if your fan favorites make the cut in the Geek Culture Countdown, a bi-weekly podcast featuring pop culture top 10 lists. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their Geek Side show in Look Who Showed Up. Join comedian Jeff May and his special guests as they discuss anything and everything in Sideshow's Sideshow. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.